You're listening to Inside iOS Dev, show about real-world iOS development. Today with you, your hosts Alex Bush.
And Andrew Rohn.
And today we have a special guest, Marin Todorov.
Hey.
Marin is the author of a recent Ray Wenderlich book, Realm, Building Modern Swift Apps with Realm Database. And he's the co-author, if I'm not mistaken, of RX Swift book.
Yeah, exactly. The RX Swift book has 4 authors. I'm one of them, and I'm the author of the Realm book, wrote it by myself.
Great, Marin. Thanks for joining us. And the reason we have you here today to talk about Realm. Essentially, what is it? Why do we want to use it? And why is it good?
So, my name is Marin Todorov. I'm a Europe-based developer, and I've been doing iOS since around 2009, end of 2009, so quite a long time now. Before that, I did about 10 years of web development, and before that, I was doing a little bit of desktop development. So it's been a long time that I've been doing a lot of different things. So I'm pretty much, like a computer guy. But I also like, a different side of all of this. So I really like writing about stuff, and especially creating tutorials or courses or like books and then blog posts. So I really like also this other side of trying to help others to figure out things that I've already figured on my own. And I think if anyone wants to know more about me or to see, some of my recorded talks or so, my webpage is underplot.com, and this is my personal page, so there's all the information about me.
All right, cool. So, Marin, Realm, what is it?
Yeah, Realm is pretty cool. It's a modern day database that is primarily targeted at mobile applications. So, a database, basically, if you have no idea what is it, it allows you to store data from your application on a somehow persisted, most often on the disk of the device, and then get back this data at a later point and use it again. So that's pretty much it. However, it's not just a simple, like a dictionary or hash map. It's a database, so it can do a lot more than just store data and get it back. And so it's a present day database because if you have used other databases to either create websites or create mobile applications, you've probably used some kind of a generic SQLite database. SQL-powered database. And so this is just a generic storage, which is pretty much fits every kind of possible use case. And what is different about Realm is that the Realm team didn't wanna go that generic way, that kind of like way that fits every possible use in every possible scenario. So they wanted to develop a specific database engine that fits the needs of mobile developers. And this is really special about Realm. It is answers some very specific needs. It really fits into common use cases. For example, powering lists of items, basically any table view or collection view. That's really straightforward Realm. It has this reactive features built in the database engine that allow you to subscribe for any updates and always show the latest information. So it's basically a persistence layer that is targeted at mobile apps and tries to power modern app needs.
So what would be why would you need a sort of a special quote unquote persistence for mobile, right? Why can't we, as you mentioned, just use a generic SQL solution, right? Like SQLite or something like that.
Oh, but you can use SQLite. Many apps use SQLite, and they have, been very successful in the App Store and so forth. So you're not really forced to use Realm. But I would say that it's just much easier to use Realm, and it's kind of like a really a delight to do it. So Realm has, first of all, it has a native Swift API. It is not you don't have to work with the low level C libraries or so like with SQLite, but you use native Swift objects. And the interesting thing that is really handy is that in your app you would create objects like normally, so your data models basically, and then you will store them directly on disk without having to convert them in any way. And then you will get them back as objects whenever you need to read them back. So you don't have to do all this conversion from objects in memory into some kind of like an intermediate state, and that will save it into some third kind of format on disk and then all the way back in memory. You don't have to go through all these steps yourself. Realm just takes objects, stores them, and then gives you back the same objects with the same kind of like relationships that you had in first place. So it makes things like this very easy.
So Marin, I have a question. This sounds a lot like the thing where you said you basically can get things back as objects, and it sounds a lot like Core Data, which is like this object graph management thing where it just hides away the details of how you're persisting things, and you don't even have to use it for persistence. So what's the difference between this and Core Data, and why should I choose Realm versus using Core Data, which is supported by Apple? So one might think, well, it's a little safer to use this Apple supported thing.
But it is, yeah. A lot of apps use Core Data and very successfully. So I'm really not here to like force you into using Realm at all. Like I'm just here to give you like if you need a comparison between both, then I can give you that as well.
We're just thinking what would be
the
advantages, right? For example.
Sure.
So we're trying to help. Let's say there's a developer out there and they're looking at different persistence options, and also maybe they want more than persistence, like the benefits that Realm offered. What would you tell them to be able to kind of make the decision on why Realm?
What Core Data is basically it's an ORM. So an ORM is this software library that runs on top of a different storage engine. So basically, Core Data is a wrapper around SQLite, right? So it uses an SQL database on disk to store the data, and then it grabs the data in the format that is being stored by SQLite, takes that format, converts it, parses it, builds objects out of it, and then it does that constantly in the background for you. So it does this conversion constantly in the background, mapping objects in memory via SQL into the format that SQLite expects, and that SQLite is a completely different kind of software that runs separately from Core Data and just does the storage. So effectively, you have a very similar end result when you use Realm or you use Core Data. The difference is that Realm it's its own engine that does not have to do all this work in the background. It doesn't have to do all this conversion of formats. It doesn't have to translate SQL into some kind of other queries and so forth. What Realm does is take your objects and start them on disk straight away. And that's why the performance for certain operations is much, much higher, because it doesn't use a third-party storage engine, and it doesn't have to, and therefore it doesn't have to do all these conversions in the background for you. And so Core Data does a lot of things right. So it does a lot of, it has a great caching strategy. It has a lot of optimizations that are taking place. So they are also very competitive in the performance area. But if you put them head to head, Realm is much faster than that. And the API is a little, I would call it just a little friendlier, probably, than what you do with Core Data.
Yeah. I can imagine that. Yeah, a lot of people seem to have complaints with Core Data quite often.
But the latest iteration of Core Data, I see that the API has been simplified greatly.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
heard that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
but I still think that the Realm one is just a little more flexible
Mm,
in that
okay.
kind of sense. And of course, there's the multi-platform side of it. Like Realm runs on Android, runs on Mac, runs on iOS, and so it's a very similar API that runs on all these platforms.
That's a great
And
benefit.
and the actual files are binary equals because what that means is that if you just grab your Realm file from your iPhone and drop it on your Android phone, if the app is expecting the same format, it can just read it out from the file. It's possible because Realm's core, so the database engine, is written in C++, and it's the same engine that runs on each platform, since it's C++, right? And so there is just a thin wrapper around that engine for each of the platforms that gives you access in your native language. So if you use Java or Kotlin or JavaScript and C# and all of these languages have just this thin wrapper that talks straight to the C++ core. So that's why the files that are produced are actually, the same.
The one thing I'm interested in, so I worked with Core Data a lot. That's kind of my go-to personally persistent choice for iOS. But it's always it's difficult to work in a multi-threaded environment with it. You have to pay attention to contexts that you create for each queue thread and so on, right? And it's you got to be vigilant of that, right? Does Realm help in any way with that, or it's easier, or there is a different approach there for multi-threading?
Yeah, this was also I think one of one of my experiences with Core Data some years ago was really that merging these background contexts into the main context. Somehow I always never really mastered it, and in a way that I would be happy with it. But yeah, so Realm has a different approach to that. And so with Realm, you can read and write to your Realm file from any thread in your application, and actually from any process as well. So you can be reading and writing to the same file from your app extension. So if you have a Today extension or keyboard extension, whatever, that's going to be a separate process. You can still read and write in the same way to the same file as you do from your main app's code. And so the difference comes from the fact that what Realm does is to allow you to do that from any thread, but you cannot have two write transactions open at the same time. So it kind of like works a little similar to Git, kind of, but not the same. The idea is that once a write transaction has been closed, it guarantees that the data has been successfully written and the file is correct. So when you have this guarantee, then the next write transaction can also, start from a complete state and complete successfully. So that's one of the strategies to keep your write transactions as short as possible, and that allows you to write from any thread, any process. So there's a there's a trick to it, but once you follow it, then
and they also mentioned
really
that there are observation features, right, in the database. So how does that work? Is that similar to what was the Core Data's one? Fetch results controller?
It is. I think in the end effect is somewhat similar. Yeah. With Realm, the big idea is that the Realm APIs do not copy your data from disk into memory, but they only give you metadata about your result set. And then whenever you access objects in the result set, only then they fetch that data from disk. So in effect, what you're doing is Realm tells you, hey, there's, I don't know, 10,000 or 20,000 objects that match your search criteria. But the API does not copy anything. So they just tell you, this is how much objects you have. And so when you have a table view on screen or a collection view, you usually need, I don't know, 6 to 10 objects at a time. And this is the only data that Realm actually loads into memory. Only the few objects that you're actually using right now. So when you scroll through the table, only the objects that you're actually requesting are being read. And then as soon as you don't use them actively, they will be then released. So this is how Realm guarantees that you always have the latest data at your disposal, because it doesn't keep a copy that can become stale in memory. And so when you say, hey, Realm, this is my result set of, I don't know, 10,000 objects, there's a simple method called observe. And if you call observe, observe will get a closure, and it will call your closure anytime the data on disk changes. And it will give you the exact indexes of what objects have changed and how have they changed.
So so Marin, you've mentioned all these benefits, the simplified API and this observation, and among other things. One thing that I noticed that seems really unique to Realm, though, among the other like core data and a simple SQL solution, is this synchronization that happens across the network, I guess. Can you describe that?
Yeah. So Realm has two products, and the first one is the Realm database, which is free and open source for both personal and commercial projects, and it's completely hosted on GitHub. So you can go and see the C++ code for the engine. You can go and see the Swift code and open issues with problems or suggestions, or and this is the one product, the database. And then there's a separate product, which is the commercial product of Realm, which is called the Realm platform. And the platform runs on top of the database and adds this automatic synchronization to a server. And for this, you have two options. One is if you are a corporation or a big company that has their own servers, you can purchase this as a software product and just install it on your own servers and run that synchronization server in your own infrastructure, host your data as well. So Realm doesn't really, it's not in the picture. And then you can also use Realm Cloud, where you can start with, a free tier, then just pay for your usage and so forth and so forth. So this is, not the option for startups or just hobbyists and so forth. And then this adds, as said, automatic synchronization on top of the database.
So, Marin, it sounds like a little bit sounds to me like Parse or Firebase, right? They have Parsehead, and Firebase has similar data database synchronization solution, right? Is that accurate, and or not? And what would be the use case for this?
I have to say that it's completely inaccurate from technical point of view. So I have used Parse some years ago, but from my understanding, what Parse did was to allow you to create objects locally in your app, and then would introspect those objects and turn them into JSON. And then it will send this JSON to some REST API on their own server. And so this will be basically what most apps will do. So what Realm does is that it runs the Realm database in your app and the Realm database on the server. And when you change, one property in one object locally, that would send just the unique ID of that property and the new value over the network. So sometimes it will be just literally 100 bytes of data that needs to be sent. So there's no data conversion. There's no JSON at all involved in any way. It's just binary data being sent over the network, and that's why it's so blazingly fast. It adds, cuts a lot of the noise in there. There's no JSON. There's no different endpoints of a REST API that need to be hit. There's just one thing that talks to each other. And
so, am I safe to assume that in this case, say you have an iOS app that uses a Realm database and this synchronization, and a backend server that does the same. And as far as the Realm syncing concerned, backend server is also a client of that database that gets notifications and updates about data changes, right? Just like the same way, just like the iOS app does when the backend changes something.
Yeah, sure. On the server, you can have a Node application, which is also a client. You can, if your server is on macOS, you can have a Swift application, which is also a client.
So to me, it sounds like, off the top of my head, one of the use
that's
cases for
exactly
this is sort of replacing the RESTful API that you would normally build, right? For communication between your iOS and the backend.
Yeah, so Realm's idea about the sync engine is exactly to replace that kind of like a different set of APIs you might be serving through HTTP, and allow you to sync to the server, data to the server, but then on the server you can still have your Oracle or maybe Postgre database where you have your massive data set. And you can be choosing to just sync like a part of it through Realm down to your Android app, iOS app, you name it.
I see. That makes sense. So Realm platform, does it allow you to execute arbitrary code, or it just does the sync part and that's pretty much it?
Well, what the platform allows you to do is, so first of all, of course, the automatic sync, but the server solution that you can purchase and install on your own infrastructure that allows for many different things to run. Don't have the full list on the top of my head, but there's horizontal scaling, there's security in terms of authentication with custom users or your own users, or authenticating access through your own custom mechanisms. There's what do you call it? A continuous backup feature. So all of these things are running, as an ensemble of services you can enable on top of that. So you can do a variety of things with the server. Right, and of course, all of these are, in the Realm Cloud, which you can connect as a pay as you go. You can use some of those, and they're kind of like tuned to whatever the generic use case is for that kind of sense. And if you install it on your own infrastructure, you can just tune it to whatever your specific case is.
Right. I see. Okay, so we're hitting our 25-minute mark. So, Marin, can you tell us more about your book about Realm? Right.
So basically, well, there was no book about Realm, and now there is. And so there's 13 chapters in the book, and it starts from basically zero. It starts with Hello Realm, with an introduction of what is it, what isn't, how to install Realm in your iOS apps, and how to start using it, and it builds from there in sequence. Basically, you go through defining objects, defining relationships, then building simple apps, then building more complex apps. Starting to use more and more Realm files in the same app, and then it expands through building projects that have extensions. So there's multi-process communication via Realm. And then it goes through a few chapters about threading, migrations, and then it ends with using Realm Cloud. So everything that you learn about the Realm database throughout the book, then you can give it a try and actually build a chat application with the Realm Cloud. So it basically takes you from zero to like the level of building professional apps with Realm.
Yeah, that sounds like a full package, kind of go to for the entire Realm thing. I like it.
I really wanted like a solid product. So, a lot of people would be required to use Realm for work, or, want to evaluate and be more informed when they start a new project at work. So I'm really aiming at people who would need to be professional about building apps with Realm.
Right. Nice. So yeah, for our listeners, we're actually gonna do a giveaway for the book. We'll have a link in show notes after we figure out the details of that. And if you would like to get a chance to get the book for free, please fill in the form, and we'll do a random hat selection, and some of you will get it. And Marin, so we're wrapping it up. Any closing remarks? Anything you would like to share or promote?
Right. I would be very happy to, of course, ask anyone who buys the book or wins it from your show and so forth. Just come back on Twitter to us and give us any feedback you want. You can do this. You can either tweet at Ray Wenderlich. We can just put his Twitter handle in the show notes, or directly at me. Tell us if you have problems, if you are satisfied, if that was amazing. Just we are there every day, and we really need to know how did we do. And I think that's it for me.
Here you go, guys. Hit Martin up. Oh, Marin up. I'm sorry. All right, cool. Thanks for listening, guys. Yeah, just I have one thing to say. Get the book.
Right. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yep, and reach us out at Twitter
at Inside iOS Dev.
Right, and we'll see you next time.